Eric Bischoff famously claimed that controversy creates cash, named his book it and everything. Well, Eric, it can also create lists, especially when his former company World Championship Wrestling is concerned. WCW has been gone for over 2 decades now, rest in peace, so you can be forgiven for forgetting, or perhaps not even knowing about, some of the company's more scandalous incidents. Whether taking place on screen or off, these episodes shocked fans, sullied reputations, and occasionally resulted in the SmackDown being laid down inside a courtroom. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 biggest WCW controversies. Join us! Oh, and by the way, we've left the Fingerpoke of Doom off this list. You've heard about it enough times. Number 10, WWE's Flair for the Gold. Presented with the opportunity to sign your main competitor's world champion, 9 times out of 10, you are going to do it. If that world champion happens to be Ric Flair in his prime, that 9 times becomes a solid 10. Slick Rick left WCW in acrimony in the summer of 1991 after frequently clashing with the company's then president, Jim Herd. Soon after, Flair began appearing on WWE television with the big gold belt, proclaiming himself to be the real world's champion. An embarrassed WCW sued him to get the title belt back, but Flair refused because he had put down a $25,000 deposit when he first became champion, which had not been paid back to him when he was fired by Herd. Flair thus believed that the title belt was his own personal property and could do what he wanted with it. Meanwhile, WCW vacated the title and created a new one, which was won by Lex Luger. The saga came to an end just a few months later when Flair agreed to send the belt back to WCW in exchange for about $40,000, the original deposit plus interest, or roughly the cost of a Ric Flair bar tab. Number 9, Missy Hyatt sues WCW. Believing she had been unfairly fired by WCW in February of 1994, Missy Hyatt duly filed a lawsuit against the company, Turner Broadcasting Systems, WCW EVP Bob Dew, and Eric Bischoff. The Georgia Equal Employment Opportunity Commission gave Missy the go-ahead to sue after investigating her claims, which included sexual harassment, sexual discrimination, and retaliation. This ranged from unwanted advances and constantly being asked on dates to groping and intimidation, according to Hyatt, as well as a blown-up picture of her accidentally exposing her chest from STARRCADE 1993 being hung up in WCW's photo studio. Missy also claimed that she had been underpaid relative to other announcers and that WCW breached her contract by not paying her royalties for merchandise or for her work on the company's very lucrative hotline. Bischoff, for his part, claims he fired Hyatt for unprofessional behaviour, particularly related to her apparent jealousy of new signing Sherry Martel, while Missy contends it's because she went over his head to then superior Bob Dew about her various issues. As was Turner policy at the time, they ultimately settled with Missy out of court in late 1995. Number 8, Bischoff sues Flair. Eric Bischoff, WCW's Maverick Senior Vice President, was a polarizing figure at the best of times. He helped take the company to unprecedented heights, yes, but he was also abrasive and could be accused of not showing his talent, including legendary stars, the respect they were due. Least of all, Ric Flair, a man who may have been tremendously popular and considered one of the very best professional wrestlers of all time, but who Eazy-E felt was past his sell-by date in the late 90s. Things got so fractious between the two that Bischoff sued the Nature Boy for $2 million. Bischoff claimed that Rick had breached his contract when he failed to show up for the April 9th, 1998 Thunder taping, though Flair contended he told management ahead of time that he would be missing in order to attend his son Reed's amateur wrestling tournament. The dirtiest player in the game countersued and disappeared from TV for 5 months, while Bischoff continued to run him down in promos and to the wrestling media. Inevitably, Flair returned and Bischoff used the real-life animosity to build a match between the two at STARRCADE, which the 16-time world champion lost, naturally, because WCW just couldn't help themselves. Number 7, WWE sues WCW. Oh, it's all getting a bit litigious in here now, isn't it? It is hardly surprising that the intense promotional war between WWE and WCW would spill over from the small screen to the courtroom. The two sides were unafraid to play dirty, and both did things that could have landed them in front of a judge, but it was WWE who filed papers first due to the portrayal of a pair of its invading former stars. WWE filed a copyright infringement suit against WCW in 1996 because they claimed the Turner-owned organization implied too strongly that Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, whose names weren't mentioned on television during the first few weeks of the angle, were actually their WWE characters Razor Ramon and Diesel invading on behalf of WWE. Vince McMahon's favored legal eagle, Jerry McDevitt, was adamant that WCW were confusing the marketplace, in particular because Hall's WCW look and mannerisms was so close to the bad guys. The lawsuit dragged on for years before being settled in August of 2000. One of the terms of the settlement was that WWE had the right to bid on WCW's assets if the company was liquidated, which is why they were able to snap it up for such a relatively small fee just months later. Number 6. Sid Scissors Arn Anderson. You talk about scissoring in professional wrestling these days, and people will harp on about AEW and start calling you daddy ass. But the real ones know that when it comes to scissoring in wrestling, Sid Vicious and Arn Anderson are the true OGs. Remember that thing I said earlier about professional wrestlers getting even more wrestlery when they go on international tours? Well, on the first night of a European excursion in October of 1993, the enforcer and master and ruler of the world got into a heated argument that escalated to bloody violence. It all started when Psycho Sid made a derogatory comment about Arn's friend Ric Flair, resulting in threats and beers flying across the bar. Things had seemingly cooled down when everyone went back to their rooms, but Vicious, alleging that Anderson had threatened him with a broken beer bottle in the hotel hallway, went to straighten things out with a chair leg. A chair leg wasn't used in the end, but a pair of scissors were, with the two getting into a gory brawl that left the Blackburn establishment looking like something out of The Shining. No police charges were filed, but both men were deported from the tour. Arn was suspended upon his return to the States, while Sid was fired. Number 5, the Benoit Sullivan Affair. WCW's series of bookers made untold number of blunderous mistakes over the years, many of which directly contributed to torpedoing fan interest. Only one man, however, penned a storyline that led to his own divorce. Evidently learning little from the whole Brian Pillman loose cannon worked shoot scenario from not long before, Kevin Sullivan devised a plot that would see his real-life wife Nancy Woman Sullivan have an affair with Chris Benoit. As part of the work, Sullivan encouraged the pair to keep up appearances in public by travelling together and acting like a real couple on the road. Wouldn't you know it, fiction became fact, and Nancy ended up leaving Kevin for Chris. Once the affair became common knowledge, it created a tense working environment, both backstage and in the ring, where Benoit and Sullivan frequently butted heads in ultra-intense grudge matches. They remained professional and no liberties were taken between the ropes, but the affair contributed to Benoit's decision to depart for WWE along with the rest of the Radicals in early 2000, when the Taskmaster was promoted to head booker. Number 4, the STARRCADE 1997 finish. The storyline between Hulk Hogan and Sting was pitched perfectly heading into STARRCADE 1997. WCW's biggest show of the year was headlined by the leader of the New World Order defending his heavyweight title against the vigilante who had watched on from the rafters as the NWO ran rampant before finally taking action and vowing to dethrone the Hulkster. WCW fans were firmly behind the face-painted icon heading into a bout which really could only conceivably have one finish, Sting pinning Hogan to bag the gold. Sting did prevail on the big night, but the manner of his victory was far from straightforward and remains controversial to this very day. Crooked referee Nick Patrick was supposed to deliver a fast count for Hogan, prompting new signing Bret Hart to storm out and right the wrong since he knew all about being screwed, if we haven't mentioned it before. Turns out Steve Borden got screwed for real because Hogan made it so that Patrick delivered a standard count, making it look like his initial win was legitimate. Really, what are you going to do when Terry Bollea's backstage politicking runs wild on you? Number 3, Hogan sues WCW. Quickly back to the red and yellow menace now as we ponder the immortal question of what happens when someone isn't a Hulkamaniac but rather a jabroni mark without a life that don't know it's a work when you work a work and work yourself into a shoot. Marks. Alright then, so let's look at Bash at the Beach 2000 and the last time we will look at a controversial finish to a Hulk Hogan world title match, I promise. So basically, Hogan agreed to pin Jeff Jarrett to win the title after the chosen one simply laid down in the middle of the ring rather than wrestle. This was all part of a Vince Russo masterpiece that would have led to Hogan returning down the line to win the title proper. But then Russo flipped the script and cut a scathing promo on Hogan as Hulk was flying back home. Terrible Terry then launched a lawsuit against WCW citing defamation of character, as well as denying him the right to his contractually mandated creative control. If you think the whole thing is utterly ridiculous, well, you're not alone, because a court agreed and threw the suit out, while the breach of contract countersuits between Hogan and WCW was settled confidentially. Number 2, the Gold Club. Technically, this scandal didn't come out until after WCW had bitten the dust, but Eric Bischoff's association with the Atlanta, Georgia gentleman's establishment, the Gold Club, was very much during his tenure as the company's SVP. The Gold Club was a notorious celebrity night spot where you could receive special favors from the exotic dancers who worked there. When the club and its owner Steve Kaplan went on trial charged with prostitution, credit card fraud, racketeering, money laundering, police corruption, and being accused of having ties to the notorious Gambino crime family, the Bish was called in to testify. And so it came out that on one night, Eric and his wife Laurie had gone back to their hotel room with a dancer named Jana Pelnis, who used the stage name Frederique, where the ladies had some adult fun as a plastered Bischoff watched and possibly joined in. He can't remember. Eric testified that he paid Frederique between $75 and $100 for drinks and dances he and his wife had received in a private room at the club, while Laurie allegedly slipped her $200 on the way to the hotel, but that what happened between the two women was completely consensual. Several unnamed WCW wrestlers were said to have frequented the Gold Club as well, but no charges against them were ever filed. Number 1, the racial discrimination lawsuit. While World Championship Wrestling can be credited for giving some ethnic minority performers opportunities, the promotion has on occasion been accused of being a good old boy network that held those same minorities back and favored predominantly white wrestlers as well as backstage workers and office staff. A group of 10 people who had performed for WCW, including Sonny Ono, Hardbody Harris, and Hard Work Bobby Walker, agreed with this assessment and, feeling as though they had been discriminated against because of their race, decided to sue WCW parent company AOL Time Warner in 2000. Sullivan, Bischoff, Russo, JJ Dillon, Terry Taylor, and power plant trainer Jody Hamilton, along with others, were all outlined in the suit as supposedly having used racially insensitive language, while WCW on the whole was accused of purposely holding back African American, Asian, and Mexican talent and being institutionally racist. Those from minorities that were put on television were instructed to play up to stereotypes, it was claimed, while their pay and benefits were much less than white performers received. The saga dragged on in the court system until years after WCW was sold to WWE. In 2003, it was settled out of court, with the main principals reportedly receiving huge settlements.